Go ahead.
Could we do a quick roll call first?
Oh, yep, I'm sorry. We're going to do a roll call.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Maybe I'll do it.
No, I'll hear you, Bay.
Okay, I didn't see you.
That's
All right,
okay.
Bay, let Faye do her work here. Come on.
Supervisor Barger, Supervisor Bartlett.
Here.
Councilmember Buscaino. Councilmember Cacciati.
Here.
Senator Delgado.
Here.
Board Member Krakow. Mayor McCallan.
Here.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Here.
Supervisor Perez. Councilmember Rodriguez. Supervisor Rutherford.
Councilmember Rodriguez is muted. Can we go ahead and unmute him? And I see that Julius Guyana has joined us as well and is also muted as Council District 15.
Thank you. I'm here.
Thank you.
Rutherford present.
Thank you. Vice Chair Benoit
Here.
and Chairman Burke.
Chairman Burke is still missing. Wayne, did you make contact with him?
Wayne, muted.
Wayne, can we unmute Wayne there?
Yes, I
There you
made
go.
contact. I just sent him the information and he should be on shortly.
Okay.
And
All right.
Councilmember Buscaino is here.
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think we got everybody there. So
Yeah.
Jana, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yes, Vice Chair Benoit. Good afternoon, everyone. This is our presentation for the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget and goals and priority objectives. And this has got three parts to it. And first of all, we'll go through the goals and priority objectives. And I'll go a little bit in details on that because for the benefit of our newer board members. And the second part is our budget. And then we'll talk about some proposals in light of COVID-19 and uncertainties. Next slide, please. And the next slide. So our goals and priority objectives start with our mission statement. And we have 3 goals and 19 priority objectives. Next slide, please. Our mission statement is to clean the air and protect the health of all residents in the South Coast Air District through practical and innovative strategies. Next slide, number 5. And our 3 goals are to achieve clean air standards, enhance public education, and ensure equitable treatment of all communities, and operate efficiently and transparently. Next slide, please. So as we get into our goal 1, we have 9 objectives, and we have shown some strikeouts because things have changed slightly. So these are our priority objectives for the coming fiscal year. So the first one is implementation of the 2016 AQMD. And basically the performance measurement is complete 6 rule adoptions and actions that result in achievement towards AQMD emission reductions. And the second is secure incentive funding for emission reduction. And our goal is still to get secure 300 million in new funding sources. And sorry.
Question?
Yes.
Okay. So relative on slide 6 on goal 1, objective 2, which is what you're discussing right now. Last year, I had a number of questions during the budget workshop regarding this item. I know the goal is to secure the $300 million of funding for the emissions reductions, but my concern is regarding the effectiveness of securing the funding or the appropriateness of the performance metric. So if you look at our quarterly dashboard reports for the fiscal year 19-20, at the end of the second quarter, we've only achieved approximately 29% of that goal. And additionally, it appears there was no increase between Q1 and Q2. So my question to staff would be, do we anticipate actually meeting this performance metric this year?
My answer to that would be no.
Okay, do we want to adjust the incentive funding goal of 300 million if we know we're not going to achieve that? Do we want to adjust that downwards?
Well, we tried to establish that as a stretch goal, Supervisor. Part of the concern is that if we lower the number, then that creates other pressures for us to do rulemaking. So we're trying to keep at that number there to go forward. Is it possible? I would have said before COVID-19, it's still possible, but in light of all the things that we're facing now, it's going to be very difficult. But
Right.
I think we can certainly take your comments and let us think about that.
Okay, and I completely understand where you're coming from. If we adjust it downwards too much, you'd end up with rulemaking. But we want a goal that is also realistic and attainable to a great extent. And if we know we're not going to get anywhere close to it, do we want to make some adjustments, during the budget process?
Yeah, well, we're getting close because originally it was over $1 billion. So we have dropped it substantially. Yeah.
Okay, being that we're at 29%, just want to throw that out there.
Point well taken. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
All right. Continuing on with number 3, priority objective is AB 617 implementation in communities. So this time the performance measurement has changed, and you can see now we are saying implementation of air monitoring and emission reduction plan for 3 year 1 communities and development of these documents for 2 new communities, because this year 2 new communities were added. Then ensure efficient air monitoring and laboratory operations, and the performance here is achieve acceptable valid data completion submission to US EPA before deadline. Next slide, please. And number 5 is ensure timely inspections of facilities, and we have to complete 100% of Title V inspections. There are about 360 such facilities. And number 6 is to maintain progress in reducing the permit application inventory. And then this hasn't changed. It is maintain pending permit application inventory, excluding permits to construct, issued, and reclaim transition applications at or near 3,000. And we have pretty much been that target, or actually above that.
Hey,
Number
Ron,
7.
it's Bay. It looks like Dr. Burke joined via an iPad, but it looks like he's muted.
Yeah, we're resolving the issue.
Okay.
So number 7 of the objectives here is support development of cleaner advanced technology. And the priority objective is, any question? Okay. So here it's to fund 10 million of clean fuel program projects with a 1:4 leveraging ratio. Hello, Dr. Burke.
Hello, I've been
All right.
listening. I just haven't been able to get a video in. I've been having a few technical difficulties.
Okay, we can see you now and we can hear you very clearly.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm on number 8, priority objective of goal 1. So incentive programs, it is to, the performance measurement is to get 50% of grant money contracted within 6 months after board approval. And the last one is complete final reports of the 5th multiple air toxics exposure study. And the performance measurement for this is written reports of fixed site monitoring data, emission inventory, and health risk modeling. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. First of all, let me ask Sujata, would you like us to hold our questions until the end of the presentation or intersperse them as items come up for in your slide presentation?
I think you can ask the questions, Mayor Mitchell.
Okay, I'm wondering when do we need to do a 2020 AQMP, and when would we start doing that?
So we actually are already beginning the process of the new AQMP development. And Dr. Fine can explain the work group process and where we are on that.
See, that's not on our list of priority objectives. I would think it would be.
Well, Madam,
Good, Dr. Fine.
Barbara, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say that the next major AQMP is actually the 2022 AQMP, but we do have some submissions coming up this year, such as an emissions inventory, demonstration of compliance with reasonably available control technology, and the transportation control measure demonstration, which CARB is doing. Those are all leading up towards the 2022 AQMP, which will be the
Welcome. You've got mail.
Schedule.
I guess so. My question was, should any of those be on our priority list, or are they embedded in one of these topics? I don't see it.
I think if the board thinks that's an important goal to record, we could record it. Wayne, what do you think?
Sorry, this is Philip Fine. I was muted and I know I was supposed to address this. So Barbara's right. We have a 2022 AQMP. We've already begun work on that. And I think if you can go back to slide, is it 7? Six. So I think what we can do is look at adding to priority objective number 1 in terms of implementation and add something about getting the 2022 AQMP started.
I think that would be appropriate.
Okay, so we will modify that.
Oh, we're still hearing feedback on your audio.
Dr. Burke, I think you have 2 different devices open. You need to only have one.
I've tried to. How about that? No?
Well, you got to turn off the audio at least on one of them. It's the audio that's feeding back. Are you on your computer now, or?
Yeah, I got to my computer.
Okay, so you can just turn off the iPad then. Or
I tried that and it was.
Close the app. Toss it in the pool, whatever works.
Is it better?
No, it's still coming back. It's still on. Maybe we can just disconnect that iPad from here, Ron. Can you just toss his iPad connection out?
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
Okay.
Supervisor Rutherford has her hand raised.
And I see Gideon has also joined us as well. So Supervisor Rutherford, your question, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to talk about, and I was on the other slide, we were on goal 2 priority objectives 1 through 5, which I think is the next slide. We are, maybe one more slide.
Oh, one more, yeah.
There we go. Under outreach, we've got large community outreach per quarter, including 1 in each county. And then we've got a reduction in our social media efforts. And I wanted to have a conversation about the contrast of these 2 things. One of the long-term outcomes of this stay-at-home order, I think, is that more and more people are more comfortable doing things online and virtually, just like we're doing now. I think that we have a greater opportunity to reach people through different social media and online efforts than we do by spending time and effort with large-scale community events. But I was also trying to think of, what are these large community events? I honestly can't even tell you what the one done in my county is. And I wonder if we've ever tried to measure the effectiveness, and what's our goal in this outreach? Is our goal for simply to people know that South Coast exists? Is it to try to change their behavior? What's our purpose in doing this? I have the sense that a lot of the perhaps outreach activities that are done are not directly driven toward clean air. And I want to make sure we focus very specifically on that.
Okay. I have a question too.
Who's supposed to answer that question?
Let me respond to Supervisor Rutherford's point. So with regards to the large social gatherings, they are twofold, Supervisor. They are one, to make sure people know that the South Coast Air Quality Management District is there and that we're focusing on clean air, and that there are generally programs that we're trying to make people aware of. So whether it's the, depending on the time of year when it's there, we have a number of flyers that are out that talk about our various programs and where the ANS programs. A lot of times, as you can imagine, we'll have a lot of interest on electric vehicles, on chargers, on the rebate programs, or there'll be interest on the check before you burn. A lot of different type of things. It just depends on the event. And we let people know that, especially with regards to awareness. One of the big things that we really try to do is make sure that people are aware that if they have complaints, that they can call 1-800-CUT-SMOG. And so we really want people to understand, because a lot of times what we hear when we go to the communities is that they don't call and they don't know who to call, or if they call, they feel that nothing's going to happen. So we've been working really hard to try to increase that. And that's one of the main things that we try to do in these type of large events.
May I weigh in, Supervisor? I happen to, you always give me these things that cause me to be bifurcated. I have to agree, and I have feedback in my speaker here. I have been to any number of large events held by the district, which seem to be very effective in getting our mission and our name before the public and what we do. But on the other hand, in the 28 years I've been here, I don't ever remember being at one in your district, ever. So I don't know. I know it wasn't because of anything that I caused, but I don't know why I haven't been there or didn't know of any events that were planned in your area. Number two, I agree with you 100% on a social media effort, but you're the one who sent me to cancel the thing with Google last month. So you got to shoot me out of the gun one time.
No,
I'm a bullet.
No, let me speak to that specifically. Look, I don't think that what was happening with Google is going to be our best social media effort. I think we need to take an entire relook at our outreach and communications program. We're in a different era than when these goals were developed and when any of this started. I'm not asking for a large community event in San Bernardino County, because I don't think that's the most effective way to reach people. Now, when Todd Warden goes out to various community events that we have in our region, he does a spectacular job. I mean, the man is the biggest cheerleader for clean air in the district's programs that we could ask for. So I think he should continue to be deployed when there are events happening, but that's different than us sponsoring large community events. Look, my bottom line here is I want to take every dime we can and put it into programs that actually clean air. I want us to buy as many clean trucks as possible. And if that means we cut back on large community events, or we retool our social media efforts so it's designed in a way that doesn't spend $500,000 on Google enhancement, that's where I want to get to. I want us to spend every dime we can on actually cleaning the air rather than the fluffy, feel-good stuff. That's where I'm coming from.
My approach on that is that I don't consider it fluffy or feel-good to go into schools and teach children the necessity of clean air. Now, everybody has to be educated. Now, you can say it's not our job to educate. It's a job of the public instruction, superintendent of public instruction. But I'm afraid I don't agree with that either, because our mission is to get the air clean. And that includes, in my view, an educational component. I agree with you wholeheartedly that our methods need to be refocused as things develop, and things are changing every day. So I'm all for you retooling and refining, but not getting to young people, I think would be a grievous mistake.
So a couple things. I wasn't specifically speaking about the high school outreach. I think there's a role for that. I don't know how much room in their curriculum program schools have for that sort of things, because we ask schools to do so much these days. But I think certainly with this upcoming generation, and as my kids are learning in these couple of weeks at home, everything's available online. The district can have a complete education component on its website that an individual student, a teacher can use and access. I'm more interested in what's specifically focused on number 2 about these large community events, and contrasting that with the social media, and asking that we do kind of a comprehensive look at what is the best way that we reach people with our specific objectives in mind, with the overarching goal to be every dime we can needs to be spent on clean trucks, clean vehicles, to get the maximum amount of air pollution benefit we can.
If you might, just to chime in, I wholeheartedly agree, Dr. Burke, on the item on the high school outreach, but we haven't gotten to that item quite yet. If we could make a recommendation that staff amend this performance measurement, because we don't know if we can even host large scale outreach events for the near term. Perhaps we could just hold that performance measurement over as a follow-up item.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Judy Mitchell. I'd like to comment.
Yes, Judy.
Okay, couple of things. When I made a note when I got to this item, and my note is that this item isn't broad enough. Number 2, the outreach. If you combine the social media efforts within outreach as a category, then it would make more sense. I do think that the community events have been very effective. For one thing, and I've gone to a number of these, we have the environmental justice group that meets several times a year. We have, the Martin Luther King Day and Cesar Chavez Day. I don't know if those are things that you include in this, but I think those are pretty informative. One of the things we found out when we did the poll for our voter authorization district was that a lot of people didn't even know what the AQMD was or what it did. So I think this is a really important thing that we do when we talk about outreach. I do agree with Janice that we can do a lot more with social media. For one thing, and Wayne mentioned this, we have the programs like Carl Moyer and the EFMP. And are we really reaching everybody that we could reach with an outreach program? Those are programs where Carl Moyer, for example, that does get clean trucks on the road, but are we reaching everybody that we need to reach with that? And the EFMP, which allows people to upgrade their dirty car to a clean car. The lawnmower exchange, the clean gardening equipment, the electric gardening equipment. Not sure we're getting the word out on some of those things that we actually offer. So, and maybe social media is the best way to do that. But I do think that we've talked about this before. We're not doing a good job with outreach. So I do think we need to look at this very carefully and maybe think about what we're doing and expand it some way or improve it in some way.
I absolutely agree. We're all in agreement on the social outreach and not getting our word out there, because we've been having the same discussion for the 28 years I've been here. So I know that I've tried everything I possibly could, but it's kind of like the computer thing in the last meeting. When I got here, it was miserable, and now it's state of the art, according to Ben. Now, my last question, because I know we need to move on, is under 617, under Senate Bill 617, how do we perform their mission and not have outreach?
Well, you have to have outreach for 617. And I think that,
Well, stop. Okay, how much funding did they send us for 617 so far?
for implementation, I would say roughly 20 million this last year.
So do we have the right or the ability to cut that off? We'd have to send them their money back, I'm sure.
I don't think
But we don't have the legal right. We've been mandated by the state, right?
Yes,
Or wrong? I'm asking a question.
you're correct.
Okay, well then, I don't understand how we can spend money for clean vehicles, which has been mandated by the legislature to be spent for outreach.
Dr. Burke, that's not what I'm talking about. We were doing these outreach events, and these have been on our priority objectives here long before AB 617 existed.
Right.
One of the challenges I had in going through this was the line items don't even speak specifically, at least that I could find, to all of the various outreach events. So it's been a little frustrating to try to break this apart. We absolutely have to get word out to people that they can buy the clean or trade in for clean lawn equipment. We want to talk about the Carl Moyer program. But we need to focus our funding on actually getting pollution out of the air. And I want to make sure that that is where all the money that is available for that can go for that. Obviously, if the legislature has line items, something for something else, we can't touch that. But I don't think we're honing in enough on that. And I think there's a lot of ways that we could retool the outreach, communication, and education program to get more bang for our buck and free up some revenue within our programs to be able to focus on actually getting pollution out of the air.
Get no argument from me on that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just want to comment briefly. Wholeheartedly agree with the comments that have been made. Specifically, I don't think it's an either or. I think we certainly, to the supervisor's point, want to spend every possible amount of money we can to mitigate air pollution. But there is an important piece to outreach. The retooling approach, at the meeting we had in person, I commented on the Google proposal needing to take a look at retooling or diversifying our strategies. And I think this could be a good time to really ask the staff to put together, or maybe we need to go out an RFP or do something to identify the best strategies and tactics of outreach, both using social media, and if there is a role for these events, I would prefer to look at opportunities where residents can re-engage after an event. So you have an event and folks can't get to an event, they missed it. I prefer to have a situation where there's access to information if you missed it. So whether it's a webinar or any type of information that we're disseminating, that we're working with all our stakeholders, all our cities, public information officers to then blanket again the residents with click here in case you missed it. Having opportunities to come and get another bite at the apple. We need a comprehensive strategy, this kind of reset that's for the next few years. So I think right now would be a great opportunity to take a look at that, not paralysis by analysis, but if we can really look at retooling, I would strongly urge that. And as the Senator Delgado mentioned about maybe moving this item off until we get through the COVID. I think there was some, if I didn't misconstrue her comments, I was supportive of her thoughts as well. Thank you.
I think we do a combination of both.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could comment.
Sure.
I wouldn't move off of this now. I think the COVID actually presents an opportunity to hop in on this. I know that a lot of the local agencies have really beefed up their social media comments on COVID with with daily reports on what's happening with COVID. I think we could use this as an opportunity to talk about what we're doing with air quality in response to COVID. I also think that, and I'll mention my city, which was pretty bad at social media. We hired an outside consultant to come in, start working with our staff to teach them how to better improve social media. We had them for a couple of years, and we're having really good results, and especially now with the COVID-19. A lot of our community is looking to our social media output for information. We may have people on our staff now that can do this. Ron certainly is very good with our technology, but perhaps a combination of people we already have, because I know we don't want to hire right now, that we would use those people to focus on retooling the social media and seeing how we can make that a lot more effective than it is right now.
Mr. Chair, I agree with the comments from the other board members. And the outreach and social media efforts go in tandem together. And I think with COVID-19, we need to really retool how we're going to focus on things for the future with regard to outreach events. And I think social media, when we talk about getting to the youth, the younger kids, social media is really the platform that they are gravitating to, and it gives us an opportunity now to really focus on enhancing what we do relative to social media, messaging and engagement. But I think one thing we want to look at with regard to the performance indicators, our percentage increase, they're looking at the number of social media followers, and I think we're missing the boat there. Followers, a lot of people will click and they'll just follow, but they don't necessarily engage. And I think what we want to focus on relative to social media is beefing up the efforts there, but we want people to engage and interact with the district. And so the performance metrics are going to be really critical. I think we want to focus more on social media, but make sure that the metrics aren't just followers clicking to follow AQMD, but actually engaging and interacting with AQMD. So the performance metrics need to get retooled, and I think we want to focus on that and maybe look at what we can do relative to getting the engagement level up and the interaction with people that are following us on social media. Thank you.
Dr. Burke, if I might, just to rephrase. I was actually trying to do that to give staff more time to retool the performance indicators on this and rephrase how they think they're going to do the outreach efforts, just so we might get to the other aspects of the budget overview. I've never been in one, so I just didn't want us to get stuck too long on this one line item. So I was just recommending that we defer the actual measurement here for this item to a further date.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to comment on one aspect of the metric. When we talk about the effectiveness of the programs, I would say that every single program where we reach out to provide funding, we're oversubscribed. So in terms of a metric, that's a pretty successful metric. We're not leaving money on the table. We're getting to the people that we need to get to in order to get those clean trucks, that cleaner technology out on the road. The social media program, we actually are beefing that program up. I hope to see great improvements with regards to the people that we have on board. We're trying to do those things, but I think from a metric perspective, if the metric is, are we getting the dollars spent? Are we getting the technology deployed from what we have? Then I think that's got to be one of the things that we're looking at. And on that basis alone, I would say we've been very effective in that. So all of these points are well taken. We will be looking at that, and we can come back and provide the board with an update with regards to our efforts to revamp our social media, to get out more, to get those words out.
What you say is true, Wayne, but I think that it's the feeling of the board that the board members need to take a hard look at this electronic communication outreach. And I'm thinking about forming another committee. I lean on Ben on this so much. I feel guilty asking him to head up another effort of this type, but he may just have to shoulder up and come on in. But I'm gonna talk to him about it and see what we can do to put together maybe a committee of the board members and the Ron and his staff to go over an analysis of how most effectively we can use electronic communication to improve our communication with outreach and with information technology. Just one side note, my granddaughter just got into kindergarten this year. And I got a note from her teacher after we went into this coronavirus thing, asking if the district would think about providing online tutoring for grade schoolers, which I thought was right along Supervisor Bartlett's communication, that it would, you know, it's all levels. It's not only high school, it's everybody. Because I can't, listen to me, for as old as I am, when I was in kindergarten, I was playing sticks. These kids are on the computer and writing programs, okay? So, we have to get some professionals in here to talk to us and tell us what's the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, we'll certainly do that. We'll work with the vice chair and Ron and have Nahal and Derek and all the others that are involved in our social media campaign.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Mayor McCallum.
Thank you. I like Supervisor Rutherford's comments relative to the education program. We ought to really think about putting on our website, developing an education thing that the school districts, this individual schools can access and actually teach online courses. And we could tailor that to grade levels, high school to middle school and to elementary school. And I think that would be very effective and a very cost-effective way of getting the educational component taken care of.
I agree. Okay, moving up. So we have some work to do on item 2. Item 3, Sujata.
Goal 3, yes. Next slide, please. So this has 5 priority objectives also. The first is to ensure transparent governance, and in that, the performance measurement is 100% of committee and board meeting agendas with material made available to public 1 week prior to the meeting. And then the other part of it is 100% of stakeholder and working group meeting agendas with material made available to public 3 days prior to the meeting. And the third is maintain a well-informed staff. So here we are saying offer and conduct 10 information sessions, training, etc. for our staff. And then the fourth is partner with public agencies, stakeholder groups, and business community. In that, we want to conduct 2 meetings of the permit streamlining task force subcommittee and stakeholder committees. And lastly, timely financial monitoring. So submit quarterly budgetary financial reports to the governing board with 6 working days of the end of the quarter for quarter 1 to 3. And then for the 4th quarter, we would like some more time because we do our year-end closing. So that would be 6 working days, end of July.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment when you get a chance to recognize me.
Sure. Are you through, Sujata?
Yes.
Ms.
Sure.
Mitchell?
Mayor Mitchell?
Okay. On your primary objective number 4, it just seems to me that we haven't gone far enough on that, and the performance measurement is pretty light. I mean, the priority is to partner with public agencies, stakeholder groups, and business community. And then the performance indicator is meetings with the permit streamlining task force subcommittee, 1 meeting. and then with stakeholders. But there's no mention in the performance indicator of meetings or collaboration with other public agencies or with the business community, although stakeholders are our business community also. So I just think that could be extrapolated a little bit and go a little bit further than what you put in the performance indicator and the performance measurement. For one thing, we do a lot of collaboration with other public agencies like CAPCOA and CARB, and maybe even some other ones beyond that, but certainly those two are agencies that we deal with quite frequently. So I just think that that's too skimpy of a performance indicator and measurement.
So Mayor Mitchell, you're absolutely right. There are a large number of efforts where we're engaged with US EPA, with the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, all those groups that you said. We can do a much better job of capturing this. We actually work with most of the local agencies on almost a daily basis. So we can beef this one up.
Thank you.
Yes.
Where is Supervisor Rutherford still in the meeting?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Do you think this would be appropriate time?
Oh, to raise my idea?
Yes, please.
Sure. I was actually contacted this morning by someone who said that about 30 years ago, they served on a committee for the AQMD that was called the Public Health and Socioeconomic Impact Task Force. They have been in touch with several other organizations this morning, including SCAG, that are going to form those sorts of committees to work in conjunction with each county transportation authority. I think it would be a good idea for the AQMD to do one as well, given that the long-term impacts of this COVID-19 are going to change our economic and transportation dynamics in some ways that we're only beginning to anticipate. But those are going to have effects on the kind of air pollution modeling that we're doing, as well as with our partners in the business community. And I think we need to have an effort on focusing on that and driving that and working with the partner agencies on how we implement those changes and how it changes our regulatory perspective.
Supervisor, if you could send me some information on that, who the contact person was, and we can reach out to them and ask them about this.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
You know, my initial reaction was that they're one of our important agencies that we program with. So not have it happened. The disbanding of that committee was even before I came here. So I'd be very in favor of re-engaging them in this process.
Agreed. Good.
Okay. Any more comments on item 4? Item 5.
Covered that one. I believe we covered that.
I think we're done with the goal 3 priorities.
Yeah. So next slide, please. So now we will get into the general fund budget. This general fund is our operating budget. And I just want to start by saying that I'll show in the next few slides summaries of revenue, expenditures, but our major sources of revenue, we don't get any tax, property tax or something like that, but our major sources of revenue are our stationary sources, which include emission fees, annual operating fees, and permit fees. And on our expenditure side, our major expenses are, of course, salaries and benefits. So with that, this is a very high-level summary. So you can see that the governing board's direction to us is to bring a balanced budget. And we did that in 1920, and the budget was $170.9 million balanced budget. And the 2021 is also a balanced budget at $179.4 million. We had amendments throughout the year. Those were approved by the board. And we estimate to end the year by using $3.1 million of our reserves. Next slide, please. So this slide is just a slide that shows that we are operating efficiently. And what it's showing is that when we compare our budget to 30 years ago to 91, 92 levels, we were, our budget was a $113 million budget. And since then, our budget has increased 59%. However, if you adjust it for inflation, we're still down. And so our costs are still down. And so, you know, we are operating efficiently and we are constantly keeping an eye out on our expenditures. Next slide, please.
Let me say about the last slide that the picture of the people in the meeting covered the end of the slide. So it was like I saw the beginning of the book, but I didn't get a chance to read the end. Is there an opportunity to move the slide down about 3 or 4 inches? Or is it in a computer? Or can I take the pictures of the people out?
You can take the pictures of the people out.
By
if you
go to the top.
Click on the top
of, oh yeah.
And do you see it now? Just this, the screen?
Yeah, I got it, yes.
Okay.
I got it.
Dr.
Okay.
Burke, should I go over it again or?
No, I got it. I got it. Thank you very much.
All right. Next slide, please. So here is our expenditures by the major categories. We have salaries and benefits, services and supplies, capital outlays, and transfers out. And once again, we are doing a comparison of our 1920 budget with the 2021. And so we have the adopted budget from 1920 and 2021. There's an increase of $3.6 million in our salaries and benefits. And mainly that's because of increase in retirement costs, some new positions that were added, and increase in salaries that were approved by the board in 2018. This is a 3-year labor contract, and this is the final year, and then we'll be going back for labor negotiations in the fall. On the services and supplies category also, there is a slight increase, and mainly it's because we have a $1 million emergency response budgeted, and then $1 million for pension obligation bonds, and the rest, $1.1 million, is going to be a revenue offset for Rule 1180. So you'll see it on the revenue side also. And then on the capital outlay side also, this year we increased the budget. Some of it is because of Rule 1180, which will have a revenue offset. But then we have some capital outlays necessary for monitoring equipment, and that has been budgeted. Next slide, please.
Sujata, if I could, when you mentioned some of the budget was offset by 1180, I just want to make clear that 1180 refers to the rule that requires the fence line monitoring system, and the refiners are paying for us to implement that program.
Thank you, Wynn.
And Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a comment.
Yes.
I expect that with the economic downturn, we will take a big hit on our PERS obligations. Would that be in your salaries and benefits line item?
So, Mayor Mitchell, right now, SPSERA gives us, SPSERA is our retirement plan,
right,
and that gives us a projection. So we have only factored in what they have given us for the next fiscal year. So the hit that, of course, they are also going through, you know, they're going to feel the effects of the downturn. And when they do that, their actuarial valuations will come out next year. And then if they do experience the losses, those will probably get smoothed over. So we will get another projection, and accordingly, we will be projecting that out, you know, once we know exactly what those numbers are.
So we don't think it'll hit us this year in this budget, but probably next year. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it'll hit next year. what kind of smoothing do they use? They use a 7-year or a 5-year?
I know Supervisor Rutherford is on the board also. I would say it's 5 years,
Yeah.
and she can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
5 years, Dr. Burke.
So it won't hit next year either, Mayor Mitchell.
Okay.
And the SB Sarah portfolio is rather uniquely designed, and we prepare for down stuff. So we're not going to be taking as big a hit as portfolios with different arrangements. So it might not be as bad as you're thinking. Fingers crossed.
Let's hope so. Thank you.
All right. So in this slide, what we are showing is our expenditures by activity. And what that means is that when you look at our core activities, such as permit, compliance, and monitoring, that accounts for almost 2/3 of our budget, which is approximately $120 million. And if you add in advanced technology and rulemaking, that's almost 80% of our budget. So most of our expenditures are concentrated on, our core activities, such as the ones that I have mentioned. Next slide, please. So here is our revenues. And as I mentioned earlier, that we have the major categories of revenue. And the first three, emission fees, annual renewal fees, and permit processing fees, we call them the stationary sources. So those are the regulated fees, and that makes up almost 60% of our budget. And then we have, so when you compare the 1920 to the 2021, you will see that, some of them are fairly flat. And I was going to mention it in the beginning, or I can mention it in the slide when we are talking about the uncertainty, et cetera. But, in light of the COVID-19, many of our customers are going to feel similar, economic uncertainties as we are going to feel. So this year, a decision was made that even though we are allowed to add increased fees by CPI, that we are not going to be doing that. So that's why you're seeing some of these revenues be flat, such as permit processing fee, you're seeing it flat, emissions is flat. Annual renewal is showing higher because that's where the Rule 1180 money is going to be showing this year. And then once again, area sources is flat and transportation is flat. Mobile sources is slightly higher because in this category, we account for the AB 2766 money, we account for clean fuels money, and this year we are going to get some administrative cost recovery for the VW program that we didn't have last year. So that's why it's a little bit higher. Next slide, please. And this is our 5-year projection, and this is what you were asked. Yes, Mayor McCann?
If we can go back to that last slide, please. I am very concerned about us putting together a budget based on not knowing where we're going here in the next several months, our economy-wise. I know the state will be putting off the budget. We're at Metrolink, we're not going to be putting a budget together, and for a while we're going to do a continuing sort of resolution to move forward because of the unknowns that we have out there. And I am very concerned that we really don't know what our revenue is going to be. Is it wise for us to put together a budget right now?
So Mayor McCallan, one more thing that I should have mentioned upfront is that on the expenditure side, we have taken some preemptive measures, such as, immediately having a hiring freeze. So our vacancy rate in the budget is 10%, and currently we are at about 13.6%. So right there, we are going to have some salary savings as we move forward. And, you know, we do have retirements of almost 30, 35 people a year. And so if we are not going to be filling those positions, we are probably going to get another, you know, $4 or $5 million of saving over there.
But really, are these fee projections realistic? Do we really know over the next 3-6 months what's really going to be happening?
So Mayor McAllen, another thing is that the board does want us to bring a balanced budget. And
well, what I'm proposing is that we not do a budget right now because we have so many unknowns.
So Mayor, in answer to your question, do we know what's going to happen in the next 3 months? No. Do we know what we can do to look at what's happening? We know that there are a number of tools that are available to us. We know that we can look at revenue. We know we can look at number of permit applications. We know that we can look at number of permits that are processed. We're actually looking at data on a week-to-week, over a year-to-year comparison that allows us to have a very fine detail in terms of what the impacts are. And the tools that we would have to measure those impacts, as Sujata said, are our ability to control the vacancy rate, our ability to look at the attrition impacts. The hiring freeze are one of those things. Our earlier meeting today at the admin committee, we were asked to come back on a monthly basis in terms of where we are. I think that should we move forward on the budget, we will be providing a very granular level of information to move forward to make any changes. But even if we didn't move forward, I would say that the things that we're doing now to monitor the situation would still help inform where we're going and still provide, I hope, the board with the comfort that we're keeping close track on these things and still being able to do it in a way that's fiscally responsible.
And the other thing, Mayor McAllen, you know, in the next slide, we're going
for a second. In keeping with Mayor McCallum's question, the largest variable in the budget is the fees, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what is the projected amount of the fees?
100 million.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Dr. Burke. What'd you say? What is
What
the
is the projected amount of the fees?
100 million.
100 million.
Yes.
Is there a mandatory requirement for us to do a budget, a state mandatory requirement?
Without the budget, Dr. Burke, we would need appropriations because every year we need appropriations to, you know, spend the money, and the budget is a mechanism that allows us to spend that money.
No, that wasn't my question. Wayne, is there a regulation which requires us to do a budget on an annual basis?
I'm not aware of a statutory requirement, but I would defer to Bay and Barbara on that item, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, I'm looking, Dr. Burke.
I think the fact that Barbara's looking is a good indicator that there probably isn't.
Right, right. I agree with that. But, you know, we have to have some framework. So there are going to be contingencies in any budget, no matter when you prepare it. So, you know, not preparing a budget, I don't think is an option.
Do we, this is Gideon. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you fine, Gideon. We can't see.
Cowan, raises a good point.
We can hear you.
And I think we do have to approach this with common sense, along with all the other things that we're doing. A good dose of common sense is important here. Don't we have the ability to revisit this, you know, as Wayne said, in a granular sort of monthly basis, and track this and make adjustments if we need to?
Of course.
So Dr. Burke, I could not find a requirement for a budget. I agree with Sujata that there needs to be some mechanism for an appropriation to be made. It may be possible to do something like a continuing resolution, but as you mentioned, a budget can be adopted one month and amended the next month if that was justified in the board's view.
Thank you very much, Barbara.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
just curious, to the point that was just made and was made earlier, and maybe this is part of what we do anyway, but could we not, under this COVID landscape, look at this $100 million fee, not only monthly, but provide forecasts throughout the course of the year? So if we're doing a forecast and then
Carlos, I don't think we have an option. I think we got to do it. This is such uncharted territory for every single person you know in every aspect of your life. I don't think we have any option but to look at this look at it every month and make sure we're not going off the cliff.
My only other question would be, based on what we know, is this the most aggressive forecast with respect to the $100 million? When we take a worst case scenario, is it not better to lean towards a lower amount than 100 million? Has that exercise already been done to say, with all that we know now, it should be maybe 80 million, or is that the best number we know right now under the current circumstances?
They have discounted the 20% under the current conditions, but I don't think that's enough. Personally.
Yeah, I would be as aggressive towards a worst case scenario as possible and build that into the budget. And if we outperform that, so be it. But I would hate to go back and say now we're hooked to a budget that was even remotely optimistic, and then we're looking at 10, 15, $20 million over budget.
Right.
Of a shortfall.
I would just add, Dr. Burke.
Yes.
And I know you've said this to us many times, that the reserve is very important, and the reserve is for instances like this where we're faced with a financial crisis. And the fact of the matter is the reserve is actually very strong for us. But even in an absolute worst case, the reserve will only go so long. But the monitoring and the tools that we have, we believe are effective with regards to controlling the costs. We would be implementing those and we would be reporting back. So there aren't anything different that we would be doing.
Well, that's after we adopt, you're saying, to monitor. I'm talking about this budget we're considering now. Is this $100 million, to the chair's point, he's thinking that maybe that's not enough to do 20%. And I would rather adopt a budget that's taking in the worst case scenario. And I'm open to other comments from the governing board on whether they think that's an appropriate number or we need to reconsider that projection.
And also in relevance to what you said, Mr. Rodriguez, is that we need to look at this monthly. This needs to be the #1 item after the consent calendar every month for the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. Dr. Burke, I agree with the comments. I think 30% might be a good compromise because it's not quite the end of the not being able to collect, but 30% might be more appropriate. But I did have a general question, just since I have not seen the budget before. I don't see anywhere in the PowerPoint that it says how much we do have in reserves.
Yeah, that was going to be in the next slide, Senator Delgado. So I was going to talk about the reserves.
I can wait.
In keeping with Senator Delgado's question, how much does 10% represent? That would be $10 million?
$18 million, Dr. Burke.
Huh?
18.
10% of
179.
179 million.
Mr. Chair?
No, we're talking about 10% of the fees. The fees were
Gotcha.
Maybe 10 million then.
10 million.
Yeah.
10 million.
Right, okay.
Okay.
No, we're talking about 10 million. Okay, so, but we're talking about an additional 10 million.
Right.
Okay. Well, okay, we're good. I'm good with that.
I just had a clarifying question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Following up on Councilman Rodriguez's question, and I'm just trying to, again, this is my first time going through this, so learning quite a bit. So some of these questions, and not just on this, but on a lot of things, might be pretty rudimentary, but we're talking about the fees here and the variability in the fees given the COVID situation. And Sujata, you went through this, but I didn't catch it clearly. You have emissions fees, annual renewal fees, permit processing fees, and there's some uncertainty in light of the current situation on the expectation on the fees. Are all the fees in the same category, or you seem to indicate that some of the fees are more definite than others, that the emission and permit processing fee are different than annual renewal? Did I catch that right? Or are all the fees sort of in the same bucket in terms of variability?
They're all related to stationary sources. They come from that, meaning our fee payers like regulated industries, etc. So, for example, somebody needs a permit. It's a brand new permit, so they get a permit, and then after that, it becomes into the annual operating fee. That means that they get an invoice from us every year, and there's a certain amount that you have to pay. Kind of, akin to like a DMV registration. When you have a new car, you register, you have a registration fee, and then after that, you have the annual fee.
I understand that, but do you see all the fees as being sort of equally variable, or some of them more definite than the others in terms of the three categories that you've put together here? Thank you.
I mean, annual renewals, if, the fee payers, they don't want to operate their equipment, then there could be a, potential loss there. Somebody who doesn't want to apply for a permit, there could be a potential loss over there. And similarly for emission fees too.
Sujata, this is Barbara. Could I take a stab at helping out a little?
Yes, please.
So as Sujata was explaining, the annual renewal fee is much like the fee that you pay to renew your right to drive the vehicle in California. So if a person wants to operate equipment that they currently have a permit for, then they need to pay that fee regardless of whether they're going to operate a lot or a little in the following year. On the other hand, emission fees are based on how much pollution you emit, similar to how much do you drive if it were a driving fee. So those are likely to be more variable than the annual renewal fees, because a person could keep all their permits because they want to be able to operate, but yet not operate anywhere near as much as they did last year. So emissions fees are more variable than annual renewal fees, most likely. Permit processing fees depend, as Sujata was saying, on whether somebody wants to install new or modified equipment. And I would anticipate that those would be more variable than the annual renewal fees as well, because it depends on people starting new or expanding or modernizing their business, which tends to go down during an economic downturn.
That's helpful. Thank you.
But the annual renewal fee.
If I could add one thing. Sorry, I just wanted to also add, there's a difference in the timing of when these amounts come in. Emission fees are generally due in mid-March. We've extended that deadline till mid-April. Sujata mentioned earlier that we have, I'm so sorry, that we have approximately 80% of those reports and fees in, but we won't know for another several weeks what that total is. The annual renewal fees and the permit processing fees come in, every couple of weeks, there's a different batch. So there's a different, there's a different cycle for when we get that. So we're also looking not only at the amounts of money, but also the cash flow.
But that annual renewal fees and so on depend on the small businesses still being in business after this COVID. And that's really uncertain right now, how many of the small businesses are really that require annual permit fee submittals to be in business.
That's a very good point that Mayor McCallum brought up. Have we any idea what percentage of our fee structure is based on small business?
Yes, yes, Dr. Burke. So small businesses, I think it's almost like 50-50. 22 some million is, you know, we have a fee schedule and we have almost 22 million coming from there, which are the small businesses. They have a lower annual renewal fee. And then we have some large businesses that contribute almost 27 million. So, and their fees on their permits are in the, you know, 1,500 or higher, and the smaller businesses is like about 400 or lower. So yes, there is almost a 50-50 split in that.
Well, I think
That's probably true for.
this just speaks to the necessity of monitoring this on a monthly basis. Now, another question though would be, so far, Wayne, what percentage of renewals have you had from both large and small businesses compared on a year-to-year date?
So we haven't broken out on a large versus small. We've broken out on the total. The larger ones are a little bit easier to do just because there are relatively few of those. And I'm not aware of any downturn in any of the large ones. It's the smaller ones that we've been really focusing on, but we will put together that information, include that as part of a monthly report.
Can you please get that to my colleagues?
Yes.
Okay. Good point, Larry.
Sujata, I see you're taking notes on that, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So the next slide, please. So this slide is showing a 5-year projection, and we've already discussed quite a bit of this, but I wanted to just focus on the reserves because that is a question, and that is something, you know, our governing board's policy is to keep the reserves at 20%, but we are above that. And we have a $55.6 million reserve. So that is going to carry us for, you know, for a while. And so that's why I think when we are talking about the uncertainty, this is a time when we look towards our reserve and probably will have to use some of it going forward in light of maybe the revenue shortfall that we will have. And I can talk more about the 5-year projection because there is other things that are projected in here. There was some things that we haven't done that the governing board had directed us prior, which was to set aside money for the infrastructure fund or to set aside money for our unfunded pension liability. We were just on the cusp of trying to do all this, but then we got hit with COVID-19. So none of that is being reflected in this budget because, you know, it just doesn't make any sense to set money aside when we probably will already experience some shortfalls.
Mr. Chair, I have some questions. So I have some concerns in we put together a gap slide. So for the fiscal year 2021, we are balanced. And then going forward, and this is pre-COVID, the projections show that we are then unbalanced for the next 4 years and drawing down on about $23 million of reserves. So I have a real concern about that because we're drawing down on a significant amount of money, and this is pre-COVID. So if we were to readjust based on what's happening today in the economy, those numbers and the gap could actually be wider in future fiscal years, and we could be drawing down even more from reserves. So that concerns me relative to a long-term strategy. And I think we have a great staff in place at AQMD, but we've really got to fine tune, and Chairman Burke is right, month by month, we've got to start making adjustments and planning for the future, because if we're drawing down in a pre-COVID environment, $23 million, post-COVID, those balances, the impacts could be even greater of what we may need to draw down. So I've got some really serious concerns that I think we need to address for the future years.
Sujata, this is Jill. I believe that the future years, the vacancy rate went from 10% back to 8% in the
Correct.
projections. And
Correct.
that's one of our largest expenses is the payroll. So one of the quickest things we could do that wouldn't really have any impact on actual staffing is to rebudget that, assuming we keep 10% vacancy. And that would save, I thought you said several $1 million a year. So
Correct.
there's a number of things we can look at.
Right. So Jill is absolutely right. In our 2021 onward projection, our vacancy rate has gone down to 8%. It used to be 8%. We made it 10%. But in light of COVID, that is something that we could once again increase, and that would actually almost make it balanced for 21-22, because every percentage of vacancy is almost $1.5 million. So that would become balanced just by doing that. The other thing we did, we have pushed out the amount that we wanted to put out in the infrastructure fund in the out years. So once again, it's not wise not to have some money for the building, put away, but we could rethink that, and that could help rebalance some of your concerns, Supervisor Bartlett.
All right, thank you.
I'm not sure it does cover Supervisor Bartlett's concerns, because you can't keep going backwards with staff. You were at one point you were down to bare bones staff to balance the budget. I think we keep looking at this thing continuously, and we may have to look at some programs which are optional programs, because quite frankly, I was stunned when I found out what our payroll was. So, I think Supervisor concerns are legitimate.
Yeah, we share all those concerns, Dr. Berg, and that's why we're like hawks all over these numbers.
I hate to be the one who keeps repeating this, but when I came to the district, the reserve was only $3 million. We'd have been out of business by now if I'd have let that continue. So that's two things in my favor today. Not is one, and building up the reserve is the other, okay? I'm keeping a chart on this. So when you do my resolution when I leave, I can give them all to you, okay?
We'll get you a back scratcher too.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, Sunjata.
All right, Dr. Burke. Next slide, please. So this is the stuff that we've been talking about since we started talking about this, is revenue and expenditure uncertainties. And right on top, as all of you have pointed out, is the economic impact of COVID-19. So for that, as I mentioned, we have immediately taken action. Some of it is, of course, an immediate hiring freeze, but then also being sensitive for our customers, we have not included any, we can increase the fees by CPI pursuant to Rule 320, But this year, the decision is that not to increase any fees by even CPI. So I have already mentioned that, but these are the actions that we have taken immediately, and we will take into consideration all the other suggestions that board members are making. The retirement cost increase, once again, I have touched on it. It is the increase that SB Sarah has already provided to us, so that has been projected, but going forward, we will be, keeping a close eye on that and putting that into our projections once we get more information from them. And the AB 617 is an ongoing funding concern because this is renewed every year. And we have staff on board, and so we would very much want this funding to continue for the next years. And similarly with federal and other state funding, federal and state agencies are feeling the same strain. And so, we have about $7 million that we get from federal grants. So that is a concern. And then our aging headquarter building, and then we've talked about that, and then penalties and settlements is always uncertainty.
Again, remember basic question, and I do want to compliment staff and the chair and all the board members who have been here for a while. It sure is nice to come on board to an agency that has a surplus and some set aside for difficult times like we have. It's certainly better than the alternative, so thank you very much. You've touched on this retirement cost, pension liabilities a little bit. Sujata, is there a way that I could learn more about that? I haven't had a chance yet to review the 70-page budget document. Is that in there to learn a little bit more about what we're facing on these things you've touched on?
So Board Member Krakow, actually it's a much bigger document, but for this purpose we sent the 70 pages, but the full document is about 200 pages. It has a lot more detail, but on the pension side, what it is that I can give you a brief overview. We contribute almost $35 million per year to SB Sarah in employer contributions, and our rate is about 38% on an average. We have two tiers. Tier 1 is our legacy employees, and Tier 2 is what we call the PEPRA employees. At this point, we have almost 50% of our workforce in Tier 1 and 50% in Tier 2. So Tier 2 is, they have a lower benefit. So over time, it was supposed to be sort of that would help lower the contributions, but that takes time. And the other thing about pension is that we have a $220 million unfunded liability with SB Sarah. So that is all factored into our contribution. Almost 70% of what we pay is towards that unfunded liability. So we are paying it down, but then the offset is that, hopefully, as Supervisor Rutherford explained, that hopefully the downturn doesn't cause so much disruption to their investments that our contributions increase and our unfunded liability increases.
Well, it's a complicated topic. Perhaps I can learn more with some other documents offline.
So there's definitely on the SB Sarah website, they do put out their actuarial valuation. The latest one came out in December, so it should be there. But it is a complicated topic. You're absolutely right. And I would be happy to, sit down and give you a broader or more detailed overview on that.
Thank you. I'll just let the admin group handle it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Be careful, we're going to pull you into that group.
But Sujata,
Sorry, Ben, my line's breaking up. I can't hear you.
Sujata, did
Why
I
don't you go
hear you
ahead?
say the unfunded liability is 220 million?
Yes, Mehmet Chair.
That's correct. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Burke, I too am shocked at our payroll. If you look at it, 145 million, that's 81% of our expenditures. That's a lot of money.
You noticed.
I noticed.
Yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked. But you know, what brought it into perspective for me was if you have 800 employees, it makes a lot of sense. You know, that's a reasonable number. So, but man, if I was in private enterprise and I was looking at that ball rolling down the chute, I'd be a sweaty guy every week, you know.
Well, and that's one of the more difficult expenses to cut. It you know, and
Laying off people.
when you have to get into that area, it really is difficult. But when it makes up 81% of your budget, when you're not getting your revenues in, that's one of the first areas you have to look at.
Tough stuff. Okay, Sanjana.
All right, next slide, please. So we have already talked about all these, I think. The contingency plan, we immediately, as soon as COVID-19 hit, we had a hiring freeze. And so there are no more new hires, and that can continue on for a while, I guess. And then freeze any other discretionary spending, which I have sort of touched on, which was, you know, it was a plan. It wasn't really discretionary, which was the $1 million we were putting aside for our infrastructure. We have, in the mid-year, we put aside $1 million, and we were going to do that in this budget year also, but we're not going to be doing that. And so that's the third bullet down. Next slide, please. And this is the last segment of the presentation, which talks about the Reg 3 fees. And so on March 13th, we had a public consultation meeting. At that time, I think everything was still, you know, business as usual, and suddenly we were hit by COVID-19. So we had to sort of quickly shift gear and turn course. So at that time, there were some fee increases and even CPI. Everything was, you know, going to be business as usual. But as you can see, now staff is proposing that we not have any, you know, amendments to Reg 3 fees and Rule 1480. And then the way this works is, and I think we need some clarification sometimes, is that we're not the net impact to the customer is going to be zero as far as the fee increases are concerned. But the way it's done in the system is that you add the CPI and then you credit back that same amount on the invoice. So the net impact is zero. Next slide, please. And so in conclusion, this is just our annual budget timeline. On March 13th, as I mentioned, we had the socio-economic impact analysis for public review, and then March 31st, because we have several of these meetings before we actually take this item to the board. March 31st, we had our 2021 proposed budget, which was available for public review. April 3rd, which was last Friday, we had our budget advisory committee, and then the comments are due by April 10th, which is today. And then this Tuesday, we had the public consultation meeting, and once again, their comments are due today. And then today we are holding this budget workshop, and then on 15th, the
comments and budget advisory committee recommendations are going to go to governing board. And then May 1st is our target to bring the budget to you. With that, I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. I think it was good. And I think the response to most questions was very good. But, you know, every single day now, they say that this is a once in a lifetime period in everybody's life. And that's absolutely true. And with this agency, I think it's absolutely true too, that this is totally uncharted territory. Any single individual who says they have the answers, I think is operating on a skewed schedule. So I think that we're going to have to probably have a framework to work from, so that we know whether we're doing okay or not doing okay. And I don't know, it's going to be up to all my colleagues to decide whether that is an adopted budget. From my perspective, is probably the best way to do it. Adopt a budget and meet every month, be on top of every aspect of that budget. Because never in the history of this agency has the budget been more at risk than it is right now. So, hey, I'm very happy that we have a surplus. It's a significant surplus, but let me tell you, my wife is forever beating me up at home because I'm always eating into the surplus. So, you know, I'm not going to fall victim to that at the district. You know, surplus is to be used in case of emergency, and believe me, this is really, really an emergency. But we don't want to run up to the line, because it took the agency probably 20 years to build up all that money that it has there. So I'd hate to see it all used over this one incident, but that entirely may be the case here. And, you know, I also, like Mayor McCallum was saying, you know, nobody wants to go to layoffs. That's everybody runs and hides when they start talking about layoffs. And I'm the last person in the world. I absolutely hate looking at anybody and telling them they have to go home. So I don't even want to start that conversation until we know that we're in really bad shape. So I want to thank everybody for coming today. This is probably a momentous day in the South Coast Air Quality Management District's history, because this budget, of all the budgets for the past 50 or 60 years of this agency, this is the budget. So, you know, let's look at it every month and make sure that we make this thing survive and prosper in the future. Any comments by any of my colleagues? Any public comment? If not,
We do have some, Dr. Burke. Kurt Coleman raised his hand.
okay, who
Dr. Burke, Kurt Coleman.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Kurt, how you doing?
I think we're doing as well as we can, aren't we?
Yeah, I got your letter on my wall.
For the last 20 years, I've been coming before your board and complimenting you on your financial, I guess, conservatism, circumspection, ability to work your way through tough times. And this year is not going to be any different. I've been listening to this entire discussion, and it sounds like you are as concerned as the rest of us are, but you've got a good staff, and the board members, I think, have a good concept on how to go forward from here, and we're here to support you. So thanks again for all the work you've done on the budgets in the past, all of your board members, and we'll get through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Kurt. Good hearing from you. Anybody else, Wayne?
No, I would just remind anyone that wants to speak to press the raise hand button or to press *9 on your telephone. And I don't see anybody else raising their hands, Dr. Burke.
Okay, then we will adjourn this budget meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a blessed weekend.
Wishing you a happy Easter. Take care.
Thank you. Happy Passover, happy Easter.
So.
Bye.